Hello everyone, my name is Amara Amjad and today I'll be presenting my analysis of the EduCore Dynamics case using Kaufman's organization elements model. When I first read this case, I assumed the company simply needed better training on its new project management software. However, after learning about Kaufman's model, I realized the situation was much more complex. So in this presentation, I will explain why I selected this model, how I applied it to the case, and what recommendation I would make to improve organizational performance. And lastly, these are the references. Here are the resources I used for my analysis and recommendation. Thank you. Case overview. Before discussing the model, I would like to briefly summarize the case. Educor Dynamics is a growing educational multimedia company that develops digital learning content. Over the 6 months, the company has experienced several performance challenges. More than half of its projects have missed the deadline. Clients have requested additional revision. Because of the quality concern, employees have reported low morale, communication problems, and the implementation of new task sync project management has created workflow inefficiencies. The leadership also knows that there is a problem, but they are unsure whether the issue are caused by training, organization processes, communication, or something else. That's why a needs assessment is necessary before deciding a solution. Now, why I chose Kaufman's model? I chose Kaufman's organizational elements model because it encourages us to look at the organization as a complete system instead of immediately assuming employees need more training. One thing I appreciated about this model is that it focuses on identifying the root causes of performance problems rather than simply addressing the symptoms. It also helps distinguish whether the performance gap should be solved through training, organization improvements, or a combination of both. Since Educore's leadership wasn't sure whether the problem was coming from, I felt this model provided the best framework for organizing my analysis. Understanding Kaufman's organization element model. Before applying the model, it's important to understand it has three levels. At micro level, the focus is on individual employees, including their knowledge, skills, and overall performances. At macro level, it looks at the organization itself, including communication, workflows, leadership, and organization processes. Finally, the mega the mega level consider the organization's impact on the outside world, such as client satisfaction, company's reputation, long-term success. I like this model because it reminds us the performance at each level influences the others. Instead of looking at employees in isolation, it encourages us to understand how the entire system works together. Why this model fits EduCore Dynamics. What stood out to me about this case is that none of the performance problems seemed isolated. Missed deadlines, quality concerns, employee frustration, communication breakdowns, software implementation issues, and leadership uncertainty all appear to be connected. Instead of treating each issue separately, Kaufman's model allows us to examine how these problems influence one another. That's why I believe it's best fit for this case. It provides a system perspective that helps identify the real cause of the organization performance gap rather than focusing on only one symptom or problem. Applying Kaufman's organization elements model. I applied Kaufman's organization elements model to analyze the performance issues at EduCore Dynamics. After organizing the information, I noticed that the problems exist at all three levels, but they are not equally significant. At mega level, the organization's external results are being affected. Projects are consistently missing deadlines. Clients are requesting additional revision, and these issues could eventually damage EduCore's reputation and competitive position in the digital learning industry. At macro level, I found that greatest number of performance challenges, communication between departments is unclear, workflow are inefficient, and the implementation of task sync has created confusion, and employees' roles are not clearly defined. These organizational issues create barriers that make it difficult for employees to perform effectively, even if they have the necessary skills. Finally, at micro level, employees may still benefit from additional support such as training on task sync and clearer expectation of project responsibilities. However, I don't believe these individual performances gap are primary cause of organizations' challenges. Instead, they appear to be a result of larger organization issues occurring at the macro level. Overall, applying Kaufman's model helped me recognize that EduCore performance problems are interconnected rather than viewing them as a separate issue. The model allowed me to see how organizational systems influence individual performances and ultimately affect clients' outcome. Now, what type of need is this? One of the biggest things I learned from this assignment is that training is not always the solution to a performance problem. At first, I thought EduCore simply needed better training, the new TaskSync software. However, after applying Kaufman's model, I realized the situation was much more complex. There are definitely some training needs. Employees would benefit from refresher training on tasking, consistent tagging practices, quality standards, and cross-department collaboration. These trainings opportunities could help employees work more efficiently and produce more consistent results. However, I also identified several non-training needs the organization needs to simplify its workflows, then clarify employee roles, responsibilities, improve their communication, especially between departments, reduce duplicate work. These are organization issues that that training alone cannot fix. Based on my analysis, I believe EduCore needs a combination of both training and organizational improvements. Addressing only one side of the problem would likely result in same performance challenges and that will continue over time. A blended approach would provide the best opportunity for long-term improvement. Why didn't I choose Gilbert's BEM model? I also considered Gilbert's behavior engineering model because it is a well-known model for improving employees' performance. It is especially useful for identifying behavior barriers and understanding how the work environment affects individual performances. However, after comparing those two models, I felt Kaufman's organizational element model was a better fit for this case. Educator challenges involve much more than individual employee behavior. The company is dealing with communication issues, workflow design, leadership, technology implementation, and organizational processes that affect multiple departments. Because these problems extend beyond individual performances, Kaufman's system perspective provides a broader framework for understanding the organizational challenges and developing a long-term solution. Strength and limitation. One of the biggest strengths of Kaufman's model is that it encourages systems thinking. Instead of assuming training is always the answer, it helps identify the root cause of performance problems and connects organizational goals with overall performance. I also like that it helps distinguish between training needs and organizational issues, which can prevent unnecessary training. At the same time, the model has some limitation. It requires collecting information from multiple stakeholders, takes more time to complete, and it doesn't provide as much as detailed behavior analysis as some other models. Even with those limitations, I believe its broad perspective make it more strongest choice for analyzing Educare's situation. Recommendation for improving the performances. Based on my analysis, I would recommend a combination of organizational improvement and targeted training. I believe the organization should first address its workflow communication issued by standardizing task sync processes, simply project templates, clarifying employees' responsibilities, and improve their communication, especially across the departments. Once the organization changes are in place, employees should receive refresher trainings on task sync, quality standard, cross-functional collaboration. It is important because training is much more effective when employees are working within clear and consistent systems. Finally, the organization should continuously evaluate its progress by monitoring project completion rate, client satisfaction, quality metrics, and employees' feedback. Reviewing this information regularly allows leadership to adjust to its intervention as needed, support continuous performance improvement. The key takeaways. Working through this case changed the way I think about needs assessment. Before learning about Kaufman's model, I probably would have focused on providing additional training. Now I understand that effective instructional designers first identify the root cause of performance problem before recommending solution. My biggest takeaway is that performance problems are rarely caused by one issue. Looking at the entire organizational system leads to a stronger, more sustainable solution than focusing only on individual employees. Overall, this assignment reinforced that effective instructional designers don't begin by creating training, they begin by identifying the real performance problem and then selecting the most appropriate solution. Thank you for your time. Have a good day. And lastly, these are the references and the sources I use for my analysis and my recommendation. Thank you.